In my last video, I was moaning about how it hadn't snowed for 6 weeks. Well, luckily this weekend, it absolutely dumped it down on us and we got loads of snow. It's now 3 days since the powder day and I've spent the last few days doing a little bit of this, enjoying myself in the deep stuff. And today, I want to give you some tips for how you get into riding that powder and some crucial things that you need to be able to do. Now, before we start this, I want to say you need to be very careful when you're riding off-piste, and it can be very dangerous out there, okay? So if you don't know what you're doing, don't just sort of venture off into the deep snow. It depends on what country you're in, if they make areas safe, things like that. I'm not going to go fully into all of that right now, but just don't take any unnecessary risks, and if you're not sure if it's safe or not, don't go. So I'll leave it there for now. But as you're watching these clips, I want you to see if you can spot anything similar that I'm doing in all of these clips, besides having an awesome time. And there is a similarity, and I'm going to explain that similarity to you today, because it's very easy for me to see when I'm teaching people. I can look at how they're riding and what they're doing on the piste, and I will know instantly if they're going to have any success or not when it comes to riding powder. Okay, and the answer is, and what I've been doing in all these clips, is running the board along its length from nose through to tail. Okay, the board is always running nose through to tail, and you might think, this seems obvious, I'm always doing this, but essentially if you're kicking the back foot out and turning the board sideways and skidding, that isn't going to work at all in powder. The reason being is we've got this board, we've got this kind of 1.5 to around 160 centimeters of length underfoot, but only if you ride your board from nose through to tail. You can imagine an arrow out here on the end of the nose of your board pointing out that way, and if you're always following that arrow, then you get that big surface area, that 1.5 meters underfoot that's going to lift you up on the snow. However, if you're skidding sideways, you reduce that down to the 25 centimeters or so underfoot, and the board is going to sink. Not only that, but obviously your board has a big nose at the front that lifts you up on top of the snow, and that helps you float. So very simply, before I take anyone into the powder, I just check that they can do carving, or it doesn't even have to be perfect carving. I'm not talking about a pencil thin line in the snow, but they can get almost carved turns, which is what I'm going to show you right now. So right now my board is tracking its length, and you have to be able to just lean your weight onto the heel side and cross your body over the board like a pendulum. I say that a lot in my videos these days to make the edge change, and that is what allows the board to maintain this nice smooth track. We get those S-shaped turns, and the board is never going sideways like this. So I'll put a bunch of videos down below on the importance of S-turns and how you achieve those carved turns, but really it's quite simple. And if you can do that, it's not too difficult to then get yourself into the powder. And it's less about technique, but it's more about this way you're riding, making sure that we're getting those S-shaped turns. I'm just peering off to the left here. A lot of the powder has been kind of tracked out. There's a few spots we're going to get into just down there. So once again, we need these S-shaped turns. You simply cross your center of mass, your hips over the board at every edge change. Almost did it a bit too much then and fell in. And that rocks the board smoothly from heels to toes, and toes back to heels. Okay, so if you can do that, you've got a really good start. And then the piece of advice that I normally give for people when they get into powder is just to start pulling their hips a little bit back over towards their back foot, because when you get in the deep stuff, if you've got too much weight on your front foot, the board's just going to sink down and get stuck in the snow. So we want to just shift a little bit of weight. Just imagine you've got a bit of string here, someone just pulled your hips towards the back like that, puts your weight over the back foot, allows the back end of the board to sink down into the snow and the nose to lift up. You do that, and the other thing that is also very helpful is having a little bit of speed. So we've got some snow we're going to jump into right now. It's pretty flat here, okay, little weight shift towards the back. You can see I'm over that back leg, and that just helps keep my front foot up, that nose lifted out the top of the powder there. I'm going to jump over once more. Don't want to get stuck on these flat sections. Okay, now here we go. So you can see so far I haven't turned. You need to keep a little bit of speed. And when you want to get started on the powder, if you have an area like what I've got right here, where you've got some untracked snow next to the piste, you can just do a little bit, get a bit of speed, cut off into the powder, get that sensation, ride through, back onto the piste. Now I'm going to come across on my toe side. I'm going to practice that first edge change onto the toes, center of mass over the board, pulls me back onto the heels. Coming across, where's a good spot, it all gets tracked out quite quickly, and that just means when people have ridden through it all, there's less spots where you can go and get that nice smooth sensation. So I pop in on the heels, center of mass over the board to bring me round onto the toes. Do a few of those and then try and jump on in, have a good ride. So very quickly, I'm filming today's video with the Insta360 X5. Ooh, I love it. This is so good. And I love the camera as well. It makes it really easy for me to film these tutorials. Right now I'm shooting in 4K, 30 frames a second. I've got the camera set to me mode, which means it knows to just shoot back towards me. And as I'm doing this, you can just see me gently rocking my center of mass, my hips back and forward over the board at every edge change, using those turns to just control my speed down through the snow. And if you guys are interested in getting one of these cameras, don't forget to check out my link down below. There's a little code that will get you a free snow kit if you buy this camera, and it also works with the X4 Air, which is pretty similar to this camera, a little bit more lightweight. You'll get one of those with that camera as well. So unfortunately for me, I'm back on the slopes now. That's my enjoyable little powder run out. But I can still kind of explain what I'm doing on this little flat section of the piste here. And you can essentially practice riding powder when you're on the piste. You need good posture, and very simply put, that means your hips should be stacked vertically over your edge. So on the toe edge, my hips stacked above the toe edge. And as you come over the board, my hips are now stacked over the heel edge. And all we're doing is just this gentle rocking motion over the board to go from heels to toes, toes back to heels. And although this slope is incredibly flat here and I'm barely turning, these mellow slopes are actually really good for practicing powder, because the first bits of powder you'll probably ride, the easiest bits for you to get used to are also these kind of mellow gradients of powder. And you'll notice when I was riding down through there, I was barely turning much. I was just kind of gently rocking my board edge to edge like this. I'm about to lose speed completely. But if you can practice on these flat cat tracks, just that movement of the hips over the board, that's going to set you up really well for the exact movements you need to make for your edge changes in the powder. So before you delve on too deep into a big field of snow, try the little bits at the edge. Just try one turn at a time. Go in on your toes, practice crossing your hips over the board, toes to heels, get back onto the piste, get on the other side, practice that edge change from the heels to the toes, crossing your hips over the board there. And once you're starting to feel confident with that, venture out a little bit more further into some of that nice snow, so you can just practice this gentle rocking edge to edge. That little weight shift towards your back foot is going to just help keep that nose afloat. And then it's really just a case of getting in there, practicing it, enjoying it, and finding the feeling of that sensation. And the snow is always changing. Okay, so right now it's not as light and as fluffy as the snow that you could see in those first clips that I was doing. And I'll just explain this actually, because I find it quite interesting. The reason for that, and what you can imagine, is that a snowflake is essentially this kind of shape. Okay, we've got these kind of fingers of the snow like that. And as these snowflakes fall, they overlap over the top of each other, and you get all these air pockets between the fingers of the snowflake. And that's what makes the powder snow really light and fluffy, is how much air is in there. You know, it's not dense, hard-packed snow like we have on the piste, but there's so much air in between every snowflake. So when you ride through that, what you're actually doing is compressing the snow down underneath you, kind of packing it in, making it more dense. That's why we want to avoid those areas that are kind of tracked out, because you lose that sort of fluffy, floaty feeling. But also, what happens over time is that as things like the sun's heat on the snow, wind could also compact the snow, but basically the snowflakes start to lose this shape. They lose these fingers, and they just start to draw in like that and become more granular. You can imagine like a grain of sand. And obviously, as those fingers draw in, you lose those pockets of air in between each finger, and you get these kind of little grains of snow that can obviously pack in much more tightly to each other. And what we've had, although we had some awesome snow a few days ago, it has been getting quite warm. It's above freezing level right now, so that snow's kind of slowly melting, getting a little bit more dense. I always think it's kind of like a New York cheesecake. It's that kind of texture. You're not going to kick up that light spray anymore as it gets a bit more dense, but it's still really fun to ride. You still get that floaty sensation. Okay, so I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but look at all that snow on my bindings. But I hope that helps you guys. Really, the main thing, obviously, technique helps, good posture, things like that. But the main thing we're looking for is achieving that S line. That line that you can get when you're carving, that you get if you have that correct edge change where you simply pass your center of mass over the board that allows the board to track nose through to tail. If you're doing that, you're going to be really close to being able to ride some powder. But if you've got those bad habits, like kicking the back foot out, skidding the board like that, then things are going to be much more difficult for you, and it's not going to work in the deep stuff. So I actually posted a video recently about how to get out of that bad habit of kicking that back foot out, so I'll link that down below. And don't forget as well, I'll put a link to this camera with my code down below. Check that out if you're interested in the Insta360, X5 or any of those cameras. Thank you for watching. Hope you're getting some good snow wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one.